All right, here we are at another episode of Flipping Houses for Rookies. Hey there, Peter. How are you today?
Hey, Bill, I'm doing good. How are you making?
Good, good. We're at podcast number 406. The name of today's podcast is When I Was a Creative Real Estate Rookie. This is a hard podcast for me to write because that was a long time ago, decades ago.
Yeah, but you have to do that so you remember what we go through.
Yeah,
You have to
I agree.
know you can see what's going on with our little heads.
Here's today's description. Everyone has to start somewhere, right? No matter what you do, everyone has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I was not always a creative real estate renegade like I am now. In fact, I made more mistakes than I care to count.
Mhm.
And today, I want to tell you some of those mistakes so you can learn from them like I have. Forget the get rich quick crap. We're going to talk about routine and nonsense stuff. I'm sorry. Forget about the rich quick crap and routine and nonsense stuff. Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly when first getting started. I found others get so much reality from my slightly embarrassing stories than I care to think about, which is why most folks in my shoes don't tell these stories in public. But if you are like me, these hard learned lessons can turn you into a deal closing machine fueled with real world grit. You will also learn as I went through time and did 100 deals, then 200 deals, 300, etc. What used to be very complex and difficult soon turned into finding the simplicities. So I had less to think about or worry about in every transaction. As long as I stuck to the basics, money kept coming in. It's when I got away from the basics, the money stopped every time.
Mm.
This is not going to be your typical podcast. This is just my stories that I hope will help some light bulbs go off in your mind as I tell them. Take the time to listen now so you can glean the most revealing simplicities in creative real estate. So there you go.
Well, that's one way to learn. You watch people, you follow them, you listen to what they've done, what they've learned.
Yep. I get something in my throat. I apologize. So let's do the housekeeping first. So first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening to us. If you're here weekly, thank you for that. We record every Thursday morning, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we live stream that onto YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So if you want to go check us out, you can go there at 9:30 a.m. Thursday mornings, and you could check us out. And if you have questions, you can chat. You can text them wherever the platform will let you text them, and we will take questions as long as they're about the podcast. If they're not about the podcast, then I won't answer them. You can go to flippinghousesforrookies.com. Top right hand side is a support ticket, and you can send us a support ticket, or you can go to our WhatsApp Messenger little mastermind group. It's called Let's Talk Real Estate. So if you go on WhatsApp and just type in Let's Talk Real Estate, you'll find us. Or you can, like I said, send us a support ticket and we'll answer your questions. So with that said, Peter, I have a couple stories I'd like to tell and some things. There's really no agenda for today,
Mm-hmm.
other than I just know that I want to do that, right? So I just thought of something. I'm going to pull something up here while we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
If I could do that. Sometimes that's not easy with my computer. My little computer is straining these days. So I think it was Richard Branson.
Yeah.
Is that how you say it?
Brunson?
Brunson?
Oh,
Okay.
what is it? The
The
air?
movie star. Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. No, Michael. That sounds like the guy that has Virgin Airlines.
Yes,
Michael?
that's who it is. Yeah, that's him. Yeah, that's him.
Okay, Michael Branson.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy,
He had a
the English
saying
guy.
that he had a saying a while ago that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Just give me 1 second here. I should have pulled this up. I just thought about this the last minute before we started that I should start the podcast this way. And I should have pulled it up before we started. But I didn't.
Is it Michael or is it Richard?
I think it's Richard.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Richard Branson.
So this is on the premise. I'll keep talking while I'm looking for it. This is on the premise of creative real estate is made to do, not learn.
Mhm.
Right? So I think what happens is too many people get stuck in the I can't make any mistakes. Right?
Yeah.
So it's Richard Branson,
Mm-hmm.
Branson. He says, you don't learn to walk by following rules. You learn by doing and falling over. Let's say it again. You don't learn to walk by following rules. You learn by doing and falling over. So there is no way around not making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have found with over 3 decades at this point is if you're going to learn by doing, in other words, hands-on. Now,
Yeah.
just to give a little background, if you haven't heard me say this before, I'm 60 years old. The first 35 years of my life, I don't feel like I was very smart. I decided at age 35, I was working for a guy that was 70 years old in a auto repair shop. And he was old and had to crawl underneath cars in the middle of the winter to fix them. And I decided I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
So I decided that what I needed to do is I needed to nurture my mind, because when I was 70 years old, I'd be making money from my mind, not from my body.
Yep.
My dad did it with his body. In
Yep.
other words, that physical trait. I have 2 or 3 friends right now that tell me they wish they could do what I do because one of them is 67 or 68 years old.
Yeah.
And he's got to get up every day and get in his truck and go to work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
talked to him yesterday. We had a nice conversation. Yeah, but it hurts. It's hard.
Mm-hmm. So believe it or not, my end game was when I was young. My end game was I wanted to own a motel in Florida.
Wow.
No idea where that came from. I had that dream for 15 years.
I've considered things like that once upon a time. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then that turned to I would like to be a direct response marketer, meaning I would have a product, a widget, and I would send out letters in the mail and sell them through the mail.
Mm-hmm.
and then get a control piece. Like after we tested it and we knew, once we sent out 500 letters or 100 letters and then 500 and then 2,000, we knew that these were the numbers. Then you roll it out and you could make millions of dollars off of one letter.
Yeah, if you get something that works, you just multiply them once you get something successful.
So in my spare time, I still do this to this day. I go onto eBay and I buy books from the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. I don't go higher than the 50s. The reason why is because in the 50s is when television started becoming popular. And that, I think it was 53 or 54, they started to be in every household. So prior to that, everything that was sold was either in a general store or department store, which there weren't many of those, was done through the mail, like the Sears catalogs.
That's right. You can buy a house with the Sears catalog.
Mm-hmm. So that's why I buy those older books from the 1900s to the 1950s, is because those guys had it figured out.
But you think that wouldn't relate to our modern world with all the technology? But the messaging was the same, like how to reach people. Is that what it is?
Yeah. So, anyways, that's just a side note. So, I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but I think my point is that I went from physically fixing cars, because that's what I did as I was an auto mechanic, right? And going into real estate.
Yeah.
So my education wasn't about words and using my mind. I soon realized that the wealthiest people on this planet, in most cases, are lawyers. All the politicians are lawyers. I realized, what is a lawyer? A lawyer is a person that has a good vocabulary, right? And they have a good index of words. And for the most part, lawyers read contracts and interpret them to the people that don't understand the words.
That's right. They're pretty complicated, their contracts with them fancy lingo.
So I decided I don't need to be a lawyer, but I could definitely understand words better. So at 35 years old, I started my journey. And ever since I was 20, my first course that I bought, I was about 20 years old, 19 years old. I was living with a girl. I moved out of my mom and dad's house the year before I graduated, not on a pleasant note. My dad was a tough guy. I still needed to graduate from high school. I had one more year left of high school, and I had a $450 rent, and I was living with a girl that had a baby that was not mine. Infant. And that's how I started. I lived in my car for, I don't know, a better part of a half a year, 4 months, 6 months, something like that, 7 months, something like that. And I had no money, and I would shower in friends' houses, and I would, I knew how to buy dollar hamburgers and shit like that to survive. And I worked. So I did not make my living using my head. It was force and physical labor. And that's how I started. Until I made that decision when I was 35 years old, which, by the way, this is a very important part of today's podcast. And then I'm going to get into my first story, right? So making a decision, believing that your decision is the right decision, being passionate about it, and not taking no for an answer is the only way to do anything. So not taking no for an answer means something like this. Peter, will you sell me your car?
No.
What if I give you more money than you thought it was worth? Would you sell it then?
How much more?
I don't know. We'll figure that out. But really, would you sell me your car?
If you paid me enough, I guess.
Okay. So how much is enough?
Well, it's worth about 8,000 now, so I don't know, 10, 12.
Okay. So if I were to give you $10,000, would you give me some terms? Could I pay you monthly?
I would need something to put down on my next car.
Okay, how much?
500.
So if I gave you 500, we could do monthly payments at 10,000.
Yeah.
So all that is an example of is not Peter's answers. It's me not taking no or coming off of my so I may be behind the scenes thinking to myself, well, if I don't get this car, if I don't buy this car, I have to walk 5 miles to work every day. And it's becoming winter here. It's going to be cold and nasty. So it's like a survival type of viewpoint.
Yep.
That's very important. Most students don't do that, including you, including me. There are times where I'm not that tenacious, right? The biggest problem that I have is when I became successful, I forgot what made me successful.
Oh.
And if you're comfortable, as Sean talks about one of our partners, if you're in silk pajamas and delivered food and a big house, you're not hungry. In the beginning, you'll do anything for a deal. And then when you start getting deals, you start pick and choose what you're willing to do. That's the danger of the business. You become complacent. And I've done that. And I've just recently realized that, and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to, the next several months, I'm going to fix that. I don't want to be complacent anymore. And the only way that I'm able to do that right now is that even though I have enough money, whether I do or don't, which, by the way, the only amount of money that I need is the amount of money to support my lifestyle. So if I decide to go live in Alaska and it costs $10,000 a month, then I need to make enough money to be able to do that. If I decide that I want to live in a tent, in Florida on a beach, then I need to make enough money to do that. Right? So that's all you need money for, is enough money to do what you want in life and reserves. So if that takes $3,000 a month, then you need to make $4,000. If you need $8,000 a month, then you need to make $10,000 a month.
Yep.
And that's it. It's just that simple. So what I figured out is that what my ceiling on my income is that I live pretty good. So I've decided about a month ago to change my operating basis and stop limiting my production to what I need. And I've decided to take my real estate company, which I work with you, and turn it into a charitable organization, which means I need to make more money so I can donate to churches and other places. So now my production or my necessity level will raise because I need to not only make enough for me, but I need to make enough for you, and I need to make enough for, St. Jude's Hospital or the Children's Hospital in Connecticut, or
Shriners, all kinds of things.
The Shriners, that's what I'm talking about. Shriners, or whatever charity we decide to use. Like getting kids off of drugs, or promoting an illiteracy program to teach people how to read.
Yeah.
Right. These things.
Yeah.
Scholastics. Applied scholastics is another one.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So I've changed my operating basis so that I can include that as part of my financial plan. Right.
Well, that makes sense. My understanding, money-wise, is people make what they demand, what they have to.
Right.
And if you look at everybody, no matter how much they make, 50,000, 100,000, 200, they're at the limit always.
Right.
Because that's what they have to make, and they manage to make that. So you're raising your ceiling.
Right.
and shoot for that.
All right, so let me start with my first story. I actually
Okay.
wrote this one. The other ones I didn't write, but I'm gonna read this one to you. Okay.
Does it start once upon a time?
There I was
There. Okay. Go ahead.
at a closing in my attorney's office. And the reason I tell you this is because this one closing was way different from all the others I participated in throughout my career. Here's why. I was giving my attorney, my closing agent, because in Connecticut we use attorneys, a check. Yep. I handed him $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
Not what I expected when I got into real estate. I actually planned on having many closings that I would actually pick up the big checks, not drop them off. I vividly remember sitting at the closing table, looking at the settlement statement, or as we call it, the HUD one, and looking at how much money the attorney made at the closing. The hard money lender, oh my God, that was an astronomical number.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, because I used a realtor, because I bought the house from a realtor, so I told him I would sell the house as a realtor. This was with Ann, by the way. You remember Ann?
I do.
The realtor chunk of dough was the biggest number on the piece of paper, and she did the least amount of work.
Mm-hmm.
Then there were all the miscellaneous fees, like proration of the property taxes and the water bill, and even a fee for $250 for not having an approved FHA smoke detector.
Oh, right. The old smoke detector.
Now realize this. This was after I spent tens of thousands of dollars renovating. I think the renovation was $38,000, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Chasing contractors and countless hours of my time babysitting this whole transaction of buying it, repairing it, and now selling it. Was an emotional roller coaster. Went up, it went down, it went up, it went down. My stomach was in my throat, was in my ass, it was up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
Now realize, this was after I spent tens of thousands. I'm sorry, realize, I don't know why you'd say that. This was after I spent thousands to buy it, on the closing to buy it. So I had two closing costs.
Oh yeah. Oh, ouch. Are you saying you made no money on the house? You actually lost money on the house?
I handed a check for $10,000 at the closing.
And there was, and it's, yeah. So this isn't a terms deal where there's money somewhere to. That's it. Just 10. Oh man. Yeah, I guess that's a lesson.
Now, don't get me wrong. Lots of people make money on these deals. I did. I had made some money on doing these types of deals. Buy, sell, and flip. I mean, buy, fix, and flip.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened was my wife got sick. Really, really sick.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of this deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I had trouble taking care of her and the project. Now, before you think that's why I lost my $10,000, it's not 100% true. I did the project as planned. I burned the midnight oil and worked around the clock to make sure everything got done. No, my loss was because the market changed from the time I bought it to the time I sold it.
Mm.
My margins were too thin. I left that closing with the document folder under my arm, got in my car, lit a cigar, headed home to take my wife to her daily trip to the hospital for treatment. And I started thinking, I wonder if there's a way to buy and sell houses without actually owning them or being a realtor. So if the market dropped, I didn't get caught with my pants down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had known this at this point because it was pretty far into my career. And I actually had done some of these deals.
Yeah, I thought you had by then.
I hadn't thought of it this way.
Hmm.
Right? Then I started to think, what if I could find the buyers before I committed to selling the property?
Hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm going to say that again. Yeah, I found my buyers before I committed to the seller of the property.
Right.
Right? And if I did this, I would know exactly what to pay and do with a seller when negotiating a deal. Right? Because the buyer would do all the due diligence for me, tell me exactly what's going on with the property, how much they would pay, what they'd be willing to do. And once I had that number, I can go back to my seller and just make my own profit. Here's what I can do. It gives confidence and certainty and everything else. You with me?
Oh, yeah.
What actually happened over the course of that time period, we'll say a few days or a week, because I didn't buy any other houses until I figured this out.
Mm.
I decided that the most valuable part of my formula was the simplistic, but not always easy to do, money now, money monthly, money later. And I decided that fix and flip was way too hard. I decided that I needed to take my wife to the hospital every day because she was ill, which, by the way, she's healthy as healthy could be now. She's doing amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I get kicked in the teeth from life, my life was not set up the way I planned at age 35, where I was thinking about things instead of physically doing things. I fell back into my trap of using force and work and labor to make my money, because that's what the fix and flip business is.
Definitely.
Instead of using my ideas and my plans and my, because there's a saying like, I can't work the plan and plan the work. Oh, plan the work and then work the plan.
Yeah.
Right? Plan the work and then work the plan. So I realized I needed to do this because even though I was making a decent living, the fact that I had to tend to my wife and I had no choice, changed my life. It put me to where I am now. It made me reinvent my life. Made me realize that keeping properties without the obligations was the most vital thing in my life. Nelson Rockefeller said that the way to build wealth and keep wealth is to own nothing and control everything.
Yep.
But I had to break out of that I'm present time cash starvation mentality. I need to pay my bills.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to break out of that rat race. And it made me realize that there's a lot of things I was doing that had nothing to do with real estate. They were my fixed ideas or my computations of this is how I make money. Well, then probably 80% of them or more were not true. What is it, Palov, the 80-20 rule?
Palov? Oh, yeah. I forget it. I don't know his name.
He's
some Italian guy.
Yeah, he was the guy that rang the bell for the dog. No, whatever that was, right? So, That was
Pavlov did it, but there was some other Italian guy that figured out that 20% of your efforts produce 80% of your results, and vice versa.
Right.
Yeah.
So I realized that 80% of my work was consuming my life. So I'd get 20% of my income.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to severely change that. But I didn't learn my lesson. I kept going. I tried to keep houses. I kind of kept doing some of that because I had attention on cash. Right?
Mm.
So I moved along and I bought another house. I was keeping some, I was flipping some. I had this concept, well, I could do both. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I need cash.
Well, people say that, whether it's true or not for you or for me or for someone else, they do say that.
So I bought a house and I broke my rules because I usually like to buy starter houses. At the time, this was a $300,000 house. It was in Plainville, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Still dealing with my wife's illness. Not as bad as it was before. Now she's in the recovery stage. She had cancer. That's what the problem was. Right? So the cure is much worse than the disease. So I buy this other house in Plainville. Absolutely using my money now, money monthly, money later program. I absolutely am convinced I have a $53,000 to $55,000 profit. The worst case scenario. Well, I hired a couple friends. You're aware of this because you were there to renovate this house.
Mm-hmm.
I'm too busy doing this and doing that, trying to do this and trying to do that and not really babysitting the job. And next thing you know, oops, it's a year later. What I learned on that deal is repairs has a side effect. Repairing a house has a major side effect. It's the taxes that you have to pay for renovating a house.
What, house tax, or what do you mean?
It's the tax for it's like, maybe I'm using that word wrong. Like the expense you have to pay for doing renovations. The penalty you have for doing renovations, the unspoken tax.
Gotcha.
Like they talk about inflation is the unspoken tax.
Yeah, it's not like a tax, but if you're paying it, it's coming out of your pocket and it's disappearing. That's another meaning for the word for sure.
And that expense was the holding costs.
Mm-hmm.
Because see, even though I wasn't making monthly payments because I had a deal with my private lender, I don't make monthly payments. I just pay you everything when I sell the house. You go through months and not realize how much that cost you till it ends up on a profit and loss statement or it ends up on the HUD statement or settlement statement.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pay the taxes on the house. I pushed everything out because you can go a whole year without paying taxes.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I was paying was the utility bills so that the guys could work, water and electric.
Sure.
I think I made $3,000 on that deal. Not 50 something on a landslide. Like 50 something was the worst profit that I could make.
Ouch.
That house had stories too. Yeah, the guy that lived across the street was the personal assistant of the police chief, just retired.
Oh boy.
The guy next door used to cut my grass, and I came in one day because I'm changing the smoke detectors. I learned that from the other deal. I got to go and put new smoke detectors in. So I'm getting ready to sell. I put the smoke detectors in. And he comes in, he goes, Bill. I'm like, yeah. Oh, man. He says, did you get your 10,000? What are you talking about? Evidently, my house was part of a scam.
What?
Somebody from across the country was calling old people and telling them that they were the IRS and they owed them money. And some guy put $10,000 in a FedEx envelope and sent it to the front steps of my house. The guy across the street, who's the ex-police chief assistant, is criminally minded and inquisitive, and had noticed that there was a little Toyota that would park out in front of the house and go to the front of the house and pick up packages.
Wow.
So this one particular day, he decided to intercept the package for whatever reason. And they didn't catch the guy, but they got the package. And because he's in tight with the police chief, they called, figured out who the package was, recovered the old man's $10,000. They gave him permission to open the envelope and see if the $10,000 was still in there, and it was. And it was vulnerability for me. That when you have these properties like this and they're unattended, things happen.
Yeah, criminals will see it, fake it, and use it as a.
Well, it's just a liability that you don't know about.
Yeah.
It's bad enough having people in houses, but when they're unattended, there's liabilities there.
Mm-hmm.
So I sell that house. Finally, I make my $3,000. And shortly after that, I end up with a house in Clinton, Connecticut. Mm-hmm. That house is worth at the time $260,000. There was a writer in that house. She was a writer, a professional writer, and she died, I think, in the house, but I'm not sure about that.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe not in the house. I don't know that for sure. And she had no spouse or siblings or anything like that, or children or nothing. So she gives the house, or her brother inherits the house, who lives in some other state. I'm going to say Pennsylvania or
was
Ohio.
it Tennessee?
Tennessee, yeah, maybe Tennessee, yeah.
Tennessee rings a bell.
Yeah.
But he was away.
So I negotiate this property at $110,000. I borrow $125,000, which I've told this story before. And at closing, I do a pre-renovation, a prehab, as you call it, a prehab. I went in and cleaned the house out and took all the bushes down and cleaned the swimming pool and cut the grass and made it so it was livable. It was outdated, but it was livable.
Yeah.
Because I had just lost $3,000 and I had a year's worth of pain and agony with this other house in Plainville, and now this house is even further away. It's like an hour away from me, 45 minutes away from me. And I'm thinking, I remember talking to you about it, smoking a cigar, riding home, thinking, I'm not doing that again. Who am I going to use? I'm not using those guys again. And who do I use when I got to change contractors? So if I change contractors, that means that now I have to babysit even more because I don't know their habits.
You are tired of the contractor game. Yeah. The renovation delays and where are they? Didn't show up. They went to another job. They'll be back next week. The supplies didn't come in. Oh, a lot of stuff.
So I decide I bought this house well enough. Now I figured $55,000 for renovations.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, I've not done those renovations. I decided to sell the property on a handyman special on the premise that I had figured out that I needed $55,000. So if I had to, I could go borrow $55,000. If the tenant did more damage to the house, what's the difference? I still planning on a $55,000 or $60,000 renovation.
You start from the beginning, either way you look at it.
So I had already figured it into the numbers. Well, lo and behold, I sell it on a handyman special to a guy that's actually a contractor. Instead of selling it for $260, I sell it for $240. I owe $125. I make him give me $10,000 down. He owes me $100,000 over what I made. Sold it on a handyman special. What's the lesson? Don't buy houses don't buy houses that you can't live in. Buy houses that are livable, so you can advertise them as a handyman special, right? And don't do the repairs. I did repairs for about a week. It cost me, oh, by the way, let's go back to the numbers. I paid $110. I borrowed $125. I did the rehab stuff or prehab stuff for like $7,000. I walked away off the closing with like $7,000 or $7,500.
And
2 weeks later, the seller gave me $10,000. So now I had $17,000 or $18,000.
that's already more. It's already more than -10 in just 3.
And I make $1,000 a month profit off of that house. And he owes me $100,000 in the back.
Still.
Plus, I put in my option agreement that it's a 0.5% a month after he doesn't pay me the first year. So now he owes me something like, I don't know, $185,000 or $200,000 or something like that, because I put that stipulation in the lease, because I stopped worrying about the property. I stopped thinking about the property.
Yeah.
I stopped the physical aspect of the deal. And I realized that you control what controls the property. So obviously I own that property, so I control the deed. And when I sold it, I control all the property with the documents. I didn't need to make it look pretty. I didn't need to do any of that. I mean, after all, this is what banks do, right?
Yeah.
As long as the house appraises and they feel comfortable with the appraisal because they do such volume, there's no other way for them to do that. I feel the same way. I own that house. I have a crazy loan on the house. I borrowed it from a private lender who was a coaching student at the time. And I paid he gave me $125,000, and I pay interest only on that property, which is why I make so much cash flow. But I still owe him the $125,000 all these years later. I'm about ready to refinance that loan and take him out. I have 2 properties that are left like that.
Yeah.
So once I started learning that, I realized, as time went on, that you need to control the property. You don't necessarily need to own it. You just need to make sure you put yourself in a position that no matter what happens, you can always earn or walk away.
Yeah.
Now that deal was such a good deal. I took a private loan, but there are many deals that I have. I have another deal that I bought in Meriden, Connecticut, that was worth $175,000, and it needed $10,000 worth of repairs. The guy owed $191,000.
That sounds upside down, but yeah, tell us what you did with that one. It just sounds like not good.
I took over the mortgage subject to. It cost me $70 to file the paperwork. I think currently I make like $800 a month positive cash flow on the rent. I've never spent any money on repairs. I sold it as a handyman special. And I've made, she's probably been in that house, I don't know, 5 years, maybe more. I did no repairs. I sold it I sold it to a couple that wanted to get started. They had lousy jobs and lousy income. Now they work for the post office and got great jobs. And she just texted me recently. I chase her for money sometimes, but she always pays. When I say I chase her for money, that means I send a text. I don't talk to her.
Yeah.
And if she doesn't answer me after 2 days, this is a lesson. The text goes like this: I've texted you twice. You have not responded. So I have to assume that you vacated the house, and I will be there tomorrow to see if you're still living there. Always 5 minutes later, they text back, no, we're still living there. But here's the thing.
Bill, how many times have you sent that same text?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea.
Half a dozen.
Dozens.
I mean, dozens. So they probably know you don't mean it, but it's like, oh crap, we better pay.
Oh, to her? I've only done it to her a couple times.
Oh yeah, yeah, to her. Okay.
Right. So these stories I tell you have nothing to do with the house. So I realized I needed to separate my business. That the reason for the house, the only thing you care about the house is it popular enough to make enough buyers want it so you can generate the paperwork that will make all the money on the house. So what I learned is the significance of the location and the significance of how pretty it is, or the significance of all the details only matter if they're going to cut into your liability. I mean, if they're going to be a liability and cut into your asset. Like, for example, if I buy this house and the furnace doesn't work, does that mean I have to put up $5,000 before I could sell it?
Right.
Sometimes I do those deals, but often I won't. Or that causes me to get such a discount that like if I got a $5,000 furnace I got to put in, I want a $30,000 discount.
Yeah, I like how you do that.
It makes it so that it's so irresistible that I just have to do it. And even then, I sell it on owner financing, and I sell it on handyman special and try to get the tenant to put the furnace in.
Yeah.
If I could. Which brings me. Were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Which brings me to podcast number 405, which was last week. Pre-qualifying.
So that's pre-qualifying for buying. You're going to talk to us a little bit about pre-qualifying? No, it's more for buying still.
Well, here's the thing is I spoke about on podcast number 405 about your goals and your passions and the clarity of where you want to be, right? I think probably the most passionate podcast I've given was recently. Let me see. Podcast number 404. How to properly predict creative real estate and you easily. Remember we talked about the Benjamin Hardy book, Being the Future You?
Yeah.
And sending yourself a letter? Right? It's because you think, where am I going to be in 2 years from now? Who am I going to be in 2 years from now? You're going to be somebody. Who's it going to be? Are you going to be the same old person, or are you going to be somebody different? Right?
Well, you're not going to be the same person, but I always thought I'll just be whatever I become based on what I do. But you had a way different, more controlled approach of like, what do I want to be, and work on becoming that. It was much more in control or more cause.
So let me change my words, Peter Kakala, speaking to you directly.
Oh, no.
Would you say in the last 10 years that you're a different person than you were 10 years ago? I would say yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you another question. Would you say your situation has changed? Or is it basically the same situation?
It hasn't changed a huge amount, but at my age, it's gonna change a lot in a while. So I'm trying to predict that and manage that, but it has changed.
But if you had your way, you would have changed it 5 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. So there you go.
No, I've been working at like, wait a minute, on this L, like when you were 35, you went, oh, I was like, I don't know, 60. I went, okay, wait a minute. And then they go from that point. Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of like me having a conversation with Emma, who's 29 years old, who makes decent money, and I'm telling her you need to put $250 a month as if it was a car payment in an IRA. Because at 29 years old, you've got 30 years for it to grow, and you'll be a multimillionaire by the time you're my age, and you won't have to worry about anything. for just putting $250 a month away. Which,
Yep.
by the way, in 5 years from now, that 250 will seem like 100. And 10 years from
Oh,
now,
yeah.
or 30 years from now, it'll seem
Oh,
like
yeah.
20 bucks.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Don't get me started on compound interest.
Yeah.
But even the houses that you just talked about, you've had those for 6 years or 5 years.
Well, these are the ramifications of the decision that I made when my wife was ill.
Yeah.
So it didn't take a lot. I didn't need to have 100 houses.
No, but I'm making a small point. Because the renovation took a year and all that added time and the quote taxes or extra fees and all that stuff that killed it. The complete opposite, the 1,000% opposite happened with these houses. That $265,000 house, the one you talk about in Clinton, isn't that 400 something now? Five,
Yep.
what?
Yep.
Right? And even the dinky one in Meriden, just a regular little house, that's way more. So if you can grab a piece of property that's reasonable.
I had a property in Bristol.
Yeah.
That I bought. When I bought it subject to, it was worth like 190.
Mm-hmm.
I paid like what they owed, which was like 180.
Right.
I don't remember the exact numbers.
Yeah.
Oh no, I paid 190 and it was worth 200.
Okay.
I sold it for like 210 and I got like $12,000 down. So I sucked all the profit out of the property.
Yeah.
I had a $390 a month positive cash flow, which was not enough for me, but I did it anyways because I wanted the deal.
Mm-hmm.
COVID came and the market was peaked in 2021 and 2022. And I was having trouble buying houses, which you know.
Mm.
And I got this epiphany one day, like, I should sell some of these houses. And then immediately my brain kicked in and said, or my mind kicked in and said, no, you can't do that because how are you going to replace them? Then I started to introspect a little bit and I'm like, well, what am I looking to replace? The house or the income? It was a good question.
Right.
Here's what I figured out.
Yeah. I mean, do you really care about the house or do you care about the money?
Here's what I figured out. I sold a majority of my portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
My portfolio is the least it's been in many years and decades.
Mm-hmm.
What I did is I made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that year. But what I did with the money, instead of keeping it or trying to reinvest it, I paid down my mortgages.
Mm-hmm.
So my portfolio is very little leverage, 30-something% leverage or something like that. So what I did is I have less properties, less problems, less rents to collect, less liability, and I make the same amount of money as when I had all those properties.
Yeah. If you pay the mortgages down, you get to keep more of the money. So that was smart.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about this before we go off, okay? So we talked about in podcast number 405 pre-qualifying.
Yeah.
That podcast is worth listening to because that is the make-break point for most rookies that make it or don't make it. But this is when I realized, because I followed Jim Camp's book called No.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Vision is power. Vision is how you guide the transaction, is with vision. Your vision and getting your seller to see the vision. Right? Mental image pictures.
Yeah.
And how everyone wins, because that's a vision. Right? And I learned that my passion and my goals and my outcome has to be extremely clear. Otherwise, it fogs the offers. In other words, if you're trying to just do any deal, anything, any port in a storm, you're jumping all over the place. Well, I could do this, or I could do that, or I could do this, or I could do that. And seller gets confused.
Mm.
Where if you say, no, I can't do that, my program doesn't work that way, I have to do this, it becomes very clear on what to do.
Mhm.
So my business plan is I want cash flow. And I want chunks of dough throughout the year for down payment money. 10 grand, 20 grand. Right?
Mhm.
So I can do certain things. Now, if I don't get those chunks of dough, like during COVID, if I don't get those chunks of dough, I could still live. But those chunks of dough do things like buy a car or go on vacation. I mean, I've been on a retreat for 7 months. And I promise you, Peter, I promise you, nobody's ever said this to me, including you.
Mhm.
Wonder, how did I pay for that? Right? I'm sure you wonder that. How do I pay for it? Where's the money come from? I must have a lot of money. No, I have a lot of assets. I don't need a lot of money. The money is just so I can live my lifestyle. And I so decided this year for the last 7 months, I was going to move to Florida and go on a retreat. And I worked some weeks I didn't. Yeah, my business is probably crashed right now. I wouldn't say crashed. It's not doing as well as it was doing 7 months ago, but it's still there and I'm still surviving. And I'll go back and pick it back up again.
Yep.
Because I know how.
Mm-hmm.
But I got what I wanted. I got to do something I've been wanting to do for 25 years or more. So all my point is this is the simplicities. All these things I'm telling you about that I learned from these losses are all simplicities. The money now, money monthly, sell on handyman specials, right? Paying off the private lenders when I could, the hard money loans, and paying off mortgages so I can get more income instead of buying more houses, right? The 4 things you need to know when you're talking to a seller, which we talked about in podcast 405, is the price, the payment, duration, and if he talks about a deposit, how you could not pay that or spread it out or do whatever so you can still get the property. Because if you put no money into a deal, the profit's infinity. Right? And if you have sellers that tell you, well, you're kind of like a scumbag and you don't have any money because you can't afford to give me a check for mine. So don't let an asshole ruin your day. And my response to that guy or girl, it's usually a guy, I say, so not true. The reason why I do what I do is because it allows me to buy more properties and keeps me from the bank regime of suppressing me on saying, you have too much debt, not enough income, and we won't lend you more money. Because my plan is cash flow. So if I have debt, what does that do to your cash flow? It kills it. I think Peter froze.
No, I'm just sitting still.
Oh.
I thought that was a rhetorical question.
Oh, okay. If you have debt, what do you think? What do you think? It kills your cash flow, right?
Well, we've talked about that a little bit, and I sold some properties just before COVID, or just right at that point, and they paid so many bills off. I don't need that much cash flow now, which is good. I mean, it's good to have cash flow, but if you have all this bills and debt, then you need more cash flow. We'll pay the things off, get rid of them. Then you don't have a lot of debt or bills to have to pay. Just living makes life easy. Then you can do more. So whether you make more cash flow or get rid of debt, you wind up in a better place. It's way,
Right. So we did this on podcast number 401, which is retire early with these creative real estate deal strategies. And we covered step by step how you could do that, which we talked about that in that podcast. Podcast number 401. So the most disappointing part of my life is these lessons that we talk about today are not used the way I use them. hardcore. People don't understand, it's like kind of like being a baker and baking a cake. And the baker like puts 2 teaspoons of salt in it. But he does it after he puts the flour in. I'll give you a perfect. Here's a better example. Here's a perfect example. Butter cake. Ever since I was 9 years old, I've asked for a mayonnaise cake for my birthday. A mayonnaise cake is a depression cake. They didn't use eggs and milk and all that stuff. They used mayonnaise because that's what they had.
Well, mayonnaise is made with oil and eggs. Yeah.
It's the most amazing cake ever if it's cooked right. So in my later life, people make me mayonnaise cakes and they're like, nah. So I just thought it was me changing. And one day my sister makes a mayonnaise cake and I'm like, holy crap, this is like when I was a kid. What did you do? I'm not telling you. Come to find out after much bribing her, seriously, she told me that the difference between the cake she made before and this cake is how she folded in the ingredients, because the directions talked about how to fold in the ingredients, which means how you mix it.
Yeah.
There was a specific way of what to put in the bowl and how to mix it that most don't pay attention to.
Yeah. Just slam it in there and hit an egg beater.
Thinking that it didn't matter. But I'm telling you, there was a significant difference between the two end products. And this is what happens with my coaching clients. I'll tell them, do this, do that, do this. And they don't think that it matters. They think the little details are not important, or the little details are little, and if they skip them or they run past them or they cheat on them because they don't want to spend the time because they're too worried about getting their money and not paying attention to the little dots and the little punctuations and the commas and the colons and semicolons, all the little things that are not the words in context don't matter. Too many people have misunderstood words and don't realize that once you have a misunderstood word, your mind goes blank. You don't absorb after you misunderstand. We have a drill we used to do in seminars, right? Draw a picture, draw a house, right?
Yeah.
You did it. I don't remember what the word was. Draw a house, draw a door on the house, draw a picture on the house, draw a tree. Right. And then what was the word?
The word, or you have a little stick figure, house, clouds, seagulls. Draw a dub, D-U-B.
Right. And people would stop drawing. They're like, what is a dub? You can't draw because you don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, just draw it anyways. Come on, just stop fooling around. Just draw it. Stop giving me, but I don't know, shut up and just draw it. Because that's what life is like. People just push you when you're confused instead of clearing things up.
So what's
dub, by the way, means a small pond or a little puddle, a little bit of water. Yeah. So it's an English word, but it's old and not used.
And that's what happens in creative real estate deals is you hit the dub and you push through it, or you invent the definition, or because the words around it, you think you know what that word means, and you invent definitions, or you invent how to apply it, and it's incorrect. And then all of a sudden I'm the bad guy because my system doesn't work because you applied it incorrectly because you didn't understand something or knew the significance of these little details. And that's what I battle with now. Because I think I always work on being better, but I feel like I'm pretty certain on what I want to do and how I want to do it. And I'm pretty certain on the things that I'm willing to put my attention on and pour resources and influence. And they work. I've got all this experience, and I've taken the complexities out of most of it and made things very simple. I'm going to tell you right now that money now, money monthly, money later thing sounds too simple, but I'm going to tell you that deal that using that hardcore and every deal, every coaching client, where's the money now? Where's the money monthly? Where's the money later? Absolutely transforms every deal. We haven't even gone into how I actually really use that formula. I've never told anybody how I actually really use that formula.
You're kidding.
Swear to God.
After all this time, you're holding out on us.
Well, it's just I didn't realize I was doing it until recently.
Uh-huh.
Because when I look at a deal and I say, this is the money now, I quiz myself. How can I change that? How can I make it more? What can I do about the deal to increase it? Didn't even know I was doing that. Because I teach it as, well, what's the money now? What's the money monthly? What's the money later? Like it's like somebody authored the deal already, and I'm just accepting what was given to me.
Right. Yeah, those are very arbitrary numbers. That's what people say. I mean, if the seller offers certain things, he's willing to do that. That's fine. But what if you could make more of it? That's, of course, you have to do that. Right. Makes sense now. Now that you mention it.
Yeah. And we're 6 minutes past, but I'm going to give you this as a punchline. This is a Ron LeGrandism.
Yeah.
The only way you make money in this business is to flap your lips.
Yeah.
Right? I've gotten cars, I've gotten lawn tractors, I've gotten tools, I've gotten couches, I've gotten TVs, and all I do is flap my lips. Yeah. All I do is flap my lips. Well, I'll do the deal if you leave the blank. I'll do the deal if you leave the car in the driveway or in the garage. Mom passed away, and this is her 1939 Buick or whatever, 1989 Buick.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what to do with the car. It's annoying for them to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Well, just leave it in the garage. I'll take care of it. You got the title? Flop your lips.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know if you learned anything from this. I don't know if it helped you, but we're done. Podcast 406 is in the bag. I want to thank everyone for listening to my stories. Hopefully, again, you got something from it. Your support. Make sure you subscribe us to wherever you're watching or listening to us. Make sure you like us, leave a comment. And definitely, if you have any questions, go to Flipping Houses for Rookies, get your free stuff there. And also, you can send us a support ticket if you so desire. And make sure you click on the link that's in the description because there's some goodies in there for you. Okay? So, Peter, thank you for participating as always. And we're over now. We will see you on we'll talk to you on podcast number 407. Have a good week. Flourish and prosper.